TikTok, time to rock. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's watching from all over the world. I am your friendly neighborhood philosopher, David Wood, and with me now is once again the author of the Quran. That is his name right there. The author of the Quran. We've got the author of the Quran. Alhamdulillah, we can ask all the questions we want now about the Quran.
That's right. You got it right here.
We got a comment saying it appears that Robert sleeps in suits.
Well, yeah, but I'm not sleeping now. I just woke up.
Yeah, you should just get a suit tattooed on your entire full body tattoo of a suit.
That's what this is.
Yeah. All right. Well, what's going on? Oh, I remembered. Before we actually get started in covering the latest news, we have had several requests for the counter on the Ramadan Bombathon. The Ramadan Bombathon. Everyone heard of this over the years? I've made videos called the Ramadan Bombathon, especially during the ISIS years. You remember how bad those years were, Robert?
Oh yeah, very vividly.
Yeah, so we had all those years of ISIS, and then the body counts were just skyrocketing for Ramadan those years. I mean, people blowing up, Muslims blowing up other Muslims' mosques and things like that. It was just endless. And keep in mind, there are plenty of people around the world who are willing to wage jihad, but many of them believe that they have to be ordered by a caliph or a leader to do that sort of thing. You want to break that down for us real quick?
Yeah, the caliph is the sole authority for all Muslims around the world, according to classic Sunni Islamic theology and law. And there has not been a caliph since 1924, but this was and remains for many the potency of the appeal of ISIS, that they claimed to be the caliphate. And 100 Muslims, I believe it was 30,000 Muslims from 100 countries went from all around the world to Iraq and Syria to join ISIS in its heyday, because they believed that this was the caliphate and that they needed to obey the caliph. The ISIS group that is now quite active in Africa and elsewhere still claims to be the legitimate caliphate, although it does not control any significant expanse of territory the way it did in those days. And so when the big difference that having a caliph makes is that only the caliph in Sunni Islamic law is authorized to declare offensive jihad. Without a caliph, every jihad is defensive. And people still don't grasp this. It's really not a hard point, but nobody ever gets this. Osama bin Laden in the 90s, when he declared jihad against America, he listed all these atrocities that America had supposedly committed. People don't understand. He wasn't just listing grievances to get people mad and stir them up to join his group, although that was certainly part of it. He was explaining why his jihad was defensive and thus justified, because without a caliph, you can't have any offensive jihad. So the infidels have to do all these terrible things to kick in your jihad. That's what he was doing. And jihadis to this day constantly they give us long lists of grievances because this justifies their jihad. But when ISIS was up and rolling and controlled a territory larger than Great Britain at its highest peak in Iraq and Syria, many Muslims believed that that was the caliphate. And so they had no compunction about offensive jihad attacks. And they didn't feel like they had to even list grievances or situate their attacks within the context of the infidels' atrocities, because the caliph was right there telling them it was time for offensive jihad.
And so, guys, as Robert was pointing out, a lot of people don't understand this, and especially people in the media and politicians and so on don't get this. According to Islamic scholarship, generally, it's the caliph. It's the caliph who has to call for offensive jihad, meaning, hey, we're going to go around and subjugate the entire world in the name of Allah. But you do not need a caliph for defensive jihad, and thus people in the past, whether they're launching terrorist attacks or whatever, they have to claim that it's defensive. So it's, hey, it's in response to what you guys are doing that I'm doing that. Whereas once you have a caliph, then you're good to go with the offensive jihad. But the really, I mean, the creepiest part of that is there were all these people in all these countries, and they were just waiting. They're waiting. They're totally willing to slaughter in the name of Allah. They're waiting for the call from the leader, and they were already there. And so, how did all of these people in all of these different countries get like this? Because Robert, when we hear about when we point out that there's been a terrorist attack carried out in the name of Allah, it's what about IRA terrorist attacks in Ireland, or what about Anders Breivik, or what about the KKK? These are all very localized groups that are focused on some specific issue, or they're just sort of random nut jobs like Anders Breivik. But when someone says, "Hey, let's terrorize," you don't see people from around the world all going and gathering to that group, rallying around that cause because they all have the same ideology. You just don't see that anywhere except right here. We did get a. Oh, go ahead. Did you have something to add there?
That's what gives the lie to all the moral equivalence arguments. Mm-hmm. That people say, well, they're Christian extremists and extremists in every religion. And yet you're absolutely right. The KKK was not really, people say it was a Christian group, but no form of Christianity actually teaches the racial hatred that the KKK taught. And it's the same thing with the IRA. The IRA was about independence for Ireland, and the Catholic Protestant split was just because Ireland was Catholic and England was the UK was Protestant, and so the whether you wanted to be Ireland to be part of the UK or not fell out along religious lines, but it was not a religious conflict, and consequently you didn't have Catholics and Protestants flocking all over the world into Ireland to fight, and you didn't have Christians of all kinds going to join the KKK. The theology in both cases was either non-existent or extraneous and had nothing to do with actual Christianity. And in Islam, we're talking about mainstream ordinary Islam when we're talking about the caliphate and how only the caliph is authorized to declare offensive jihad, but anybody can declare defensive jihad if the infidels are acting up. That's standard Islam. And so it's not in the least surprising that millions of Muslims around the world would act upon that.
Mm-hmm. So let's go ahead and bring up the tally. And it's weird because on the one hand, compared to the ISIS years, you look at this and say, wow, things are much better now.
Right.
But here we have the Ramadan Bombathon scorecard from 2022. And the religionofpeace.com started this years ago, and it was meant to be a response to the claim that whenever there was a terrorist attack, it would be, but there was Anders Breivik, and there was this other terrorist attack by this group in the 80s, and so because there have been other terrorist groups and terrorist attacks carried out, therefore there's not a problem in Islam. It's the same thing. So what the religionofpeace.com started doing was keeping a scorecard during Ramadan. So every attack that makes it into the news is recorded and tallied, and you get the results there. So the Ramadan Bombathon 2022. This is day 18 of Ramadan, so there's still several days of Ramadan to go. But terrorist attacks carried out in the name of Islam. There have been 82 attacks so far during Ramadan, carried out in the name of Islam. 402 people killed. In the name of all other religions combined. In the name of all other religions combined. So someone's saying, "Hey, I'm killing you because in the name of Jesus," or something like that. 0, and kills 0. And then of course he added this score for right wing or anti-Muslim extremists. So that was added because of Anders Breivik. And you got 0 and 0. And so it's the same thing every single Ramadan. Occasionally you'll have an attack carried out by someone else in the name of some other religion. So you might end up with like one or maybe two kills or something like that in the name of all other religions combined. But keep in mind, this is extremely low compared to 2016, 2017, when you were getting way, 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 way more kills because you had offensive jihad going on. But the scorecard always looks like this. The number of attacks carried out in the name of Islam always, always, always massively dwarfs every other religion in the world combined. And you'd think that in a sane world we would ask why, but you're just not allowed to do that. If you ask why, then you must be some sort of racist, Islamophobic, hate mongering bigot. But now we're going to go to some news. But before we did, one comment, Robert, for you. I said, Robert Spencer. Robert Spencer, you should be ashamed for writing so many hate-filled verses in your book, particularly given that 1.8 billion people follow it. Shame on you, Robert, for foisting this book upon the world.
Yeah, I wanted to make it dramatic, a little action in there, throw a few kill the unbelievers wherever you find them in there, and it livens it up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I think I got carried away a little bit too much with a lot of the rules, a lot of the long passages about how terrible the unbelievers are. So, you sprinkle in a few kill thems and people wake up.
Yeah, you can, but we can abrogate that later on. We can abrogate that. We can
abrogate.
We could abrogate all that stuff. Oh, before you jump into the news, Robert, could you scoot slightly towards your right? You're just a bit off center here. All right, we're good. And I actually know this time that there has been some jihad because I've seen some of the stories about some of the jihad, and I'm aware. I made a video about the riots in Sweden and so on. So I know there's some stuff to talk about, which is shocking because it is Ramadan. It should be the most peaceful month of the year. But what do you got for us, Robert?
Well, actually, in line with that Ramadan is the most peaceful month of the year, a mosque should be the most peaceful place on the planet because it is the center of the religion of peace. Consequently, it is the most peaceful place that can possibly be imagined, the place where the worship is carried out of this peaceful religion. In any case, I mention this because one of the stories is out of Israel that there is a lot of unrest right now about the Al-Aqsa Mosque or surrounding the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And there have been photographs widely distributed, you may have seen them, David, of Muslims bringing rocks and large stones into the Al-Aqsa Mosque and other things. I saw a wheel in there and all kinds of things that they are using to throw at Israelis. And there have been quite a few people injured. This is following, of course, the jihad terror attacks where people were killed in Israel in a quick succession of several jihad terror attacks. Now, the thing about it is that I have seen several well-meaning people write about how these jihadis are desecrating the Al-Aqsa Mosque by using it to store their weapons, using it to store their rocks, and so on. And this demonstrates that they don't really know what a mosque is for. A mosque is a center of Islamic activity. And what is the greatest of all Islamic activities? According to a hadith, Muhammad says the greatest deed is jihad. And jihad being warfare against unbelievers and not just giving people a hug and getting your kids to school on time. Warfare against unbelievers is going to be, in many cases, organized in a mosque. So what's happening at the Al-Aqsa Mosque over the last few days is not unusual. And over the years at Jihad Watch, there are many, many more, but here are just a few. In Kenya, a few years back, police raided 2 mosques in Mombasa, found grenades and ammunition. In Russia, an imam was arrested. Weapons and explosives were found in his mosque. In Philadelphia, a man who shot a cop and said he did it for ISIS, for the Islamic State, was a frequent member of a local mosque. Incidentally, also, the 2 ISIS guys who came to kill us at our Muhammad art exhibit in 2015 in Texas were active members of their mosque in Phoenix, the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix. In Singapore, 26 Muslims were deported after recruiting for the Islamic State in a mosque. In Afghanistan, there are many stories, and one in 2019, weapons, mines, and bombs were found stored in a mosque. And all of the people who used mosques in this way did not think this incongruous at all. You might find it odd to read stories, as there used to be stories also out of Afghanistan of people being blown up in a mosque when their bomb making class went wrong, because you don't have bomb making classes in your church. But a church and a mosque are not actually the same thing. People assume, oh, it's just the Islamic house of worship, and so it's a place of peace and meditation and prayer. It is, because jihad is a sacred act in Islam, it is also a place of preparing for war.
Robert, it has been brought up in the chat here. If people are bringing rocks into the Al Aqsa Mosque, how do we know that they aren't simply bringing those in to wipe themselves? Since Muhammad said that his followers should wipe themselves with an uneven number of rocks. See?
Did you? If you saw the photos, you'd know the answer. The rocks were pretty big.
Oh, okay. Maybe they were for very large men. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know.
We're trying to give the benefit of the doubt, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
It's very clear. In all seriousness, I know this. The whole question is in jest, but I should note that it's quite clear what was being done here, because there were men obviously dressed in order to commit acts of violence. They had their faces covered. They had their heads covered. The slogans with the bandanas, with the Hamas slogans and the other slogans, all of which are Islamic, and they're draped in the flag of the Shahada or the Palestinian flag, and they're holding a bunch of rocks and standing in the mosque. So their intentions were clear.
Hey, I have a little. I don't want to eat up our time here, but I do have a little side story. I don't think I've told this anywhere. But I took a tour with a Christian group in Israel a couple of years ago, and the group wasn't going to the Temple Mount, but I wanted to go down there. And so I'm walking around the Temple Mount, and I start walking around the Dome of the Rock, and then a guy who's he's at the door of the Dome of the Rock. He yells, "Are you a Muslim?" And I go, "No." "Is he not a Muslim?" And he gets on his walkie-talkie and starts talking. And so anyway, I walk away. And then when I walk back, because I'm sure you've seen the pictures before, it looks like marble. The features of the marble look like images of demons on the side of the Dome of the Rock there. So I walk over there and I take a picture, and I hear thump 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 thump. Someone coming running behind me. And so I'm filming there, and then so I go into selfie mode. So in case I get clocked, then someone's going to be on camera. So I go into selfie mode and I start walking away, and then I hear the footsteps. I hear the footsteps stop. But then as I'm walking around, I see anytime I get anywhere near this, there are guys like on the corners, like standing there, like waiting for me to walk closer to this. So again, I don't know if I should be mentioning him, but someone else who was touring Israel at that same time was the guy from. He's a retired Army Ranger, but he has the channel Warrior Poet Society. And I saw him, and I was like, "Hey, Army Ranger, this guy could have my back." And I was like, "Hey, man, you got my back?" He's like, "What? What's going on?" "Sure." And I go, "All right, these guys are about to jump on me every time I get close to the Dome of the Rock. So I'm gonna go over there, and whatever happens, you just get it on video, right? I just want good video, whatever. I don't want them, beating the crap out of me, and then they get away with it, right? So get some good video." And he just goes, You need to not go over there. I was like, and it was funny because I hadn't considered that as an option, right? It was like, well, it's obviously I'm going to go over there. They're acting like they're going to beat me up if I go over there. Obviously, I'm going to go over there. And he's like, you need to not go over there. You already got video footage. Why don't you just be happy with what you got and not go over there? And I was like, oh, I could not go over there and get beat up, huh? Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I'll go with that one. And then so I didn't go over there, but anyway.
Was that the trip when you went into the Kaaba and made the film there?
No. That was totally different trip. Different trip to the Kaaba.
You might have just slipped over into Mecca while you were in the neighborhood. Anyway, interesting story that I found fascinating. it's not specifically jihad, and we got a lot of jihad, but since we're a little bit tangential already here, there was a story that 73% of Palestinians believe in a prophecy that Israel will collapse by June 2022, within 2 months. And I found the prophecy. Actually, I was kindly sent it by a Jihad Watch reader, and it's very interesting prophecy. It's quite lengthy and complicated, but it's based primarily on chapter 17 of the Quran and the passages that follow the one that is the basis for the Islamic claim to Jerusalem as an Islamic holy city. That is 17:1, which does not, I must emphasize, mention Jerusalem at all by name. It says, "May he be glorified who carried his servant by night from the sacred mosque to the farthest mosque, Al-Aqsa, around which we have blessed, so that we might show him some of our signs. Indeed, he only is the seer, the hearer." Anyway, if you go on, it says that they entered the temple, even as they entered it the first time, to lay waste to all that they conquered with an utter wasting. And this guy is connecting that with Israeli police going into the Al-Aqsa Mosque to find these jihadis. And it's very interesting exegesis of the Quran. Really, I'm not sure it's correct, but I guess we'll see in June.
Hmm.
Meanwhile, let's see. In Austria,
I actually want to make a video on that because of how popular it is.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. 73% of the Palestinians. So
That's a lot.
do you have the actual exegesis and prophecy? If not, I'll send it to you.
Oh yes, please send that to me. It's interesting because I mean those are the kinds of things that can help destroy a leader's credibility. You know what I
Oh
mean?
yeah,
Because yeah, so and I'm saying that because we've had uh, you know Christian televangelists and so on like that, and the end is coming on this day, and
yeah.
so it's good when they're exposed.
So the clock is ticking on this guy.
Hmm.
All right. So Ali Harbi Ali, who killed the British MP Sir David Amos. It was very interesting. He was on trial recently, and he said that he was a moderate Muslim. And those were the terms that he used, though he said he's a moderate Muslim. Now, he said that he killed Amos for Islam because Amos had voted for British intervention in Iraq and Afghanistan. And so he thought that Amos was an enemy of Muslims, and he killed him as an example for other politicians, he said. And he did it in order to protect Islam and Muslims. But he did not consider himself to be a jihadi or an extremist. At least that's what he said at his trial. He said he was a moderate. I guess maybe he would have killed more MPs if he had not been a moderate. But his moderation did not mean that he was entirely a peaceful fellow. Another interesting
He,
thing
he, he
out
was
of
he was moderately moderate. Let's say that.
yeah, he was moderate in his moderation.
Mhm.
Another Quran-based story we have comes out of the UK as well, and there's an active manhunt going on actually for this man. Although I don't think it's very likely that they're going to find him at this point. This was a man back in December, but they're still looking for him. And as a matter of fact, the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism just last Thursday offered a £10,000 reward. That's $13,000 in American money for any information about this guy who during last Hanukkah in December, he went up to a man. He said, "You look Jewish." And he explained, "I am looking for a Jew to kill." And as it happened, the man that he confronted was Jewish. But when somebody says, "I'm looking for a Jew to kill," many people will then deny that they are indeed in the group. And so this guy did that. And he said he wasn't Jewish. The attacker said, "Good, I want to find a Jew to kill." And later on, however, he started to tear down a Hanukkah display that was out there in public in Hampstead in the UK. And the same man confronted him, whereupon the attacker said, "I knew you were Jewish. You lied to me. You were Jewish. I'm going to kill you." And he said, "I want to kill my first Jew." Now, where did somebody get the idea? By the way, the witnesses say it looked as if he was Somali, this fellow. And where did he get this idea that he had some responsibility to kill Jews? Could it possibly have come from the hadith in which Muhammad says, the last day will not come until Muslims kill Jews and Jews hide behind stones and trees, and the trees cry out, "O Muslim, there is a Jew hiding behind me, come and kill him." Now, that's a very extraordinary statement, really, because the last hour will not come until Muslims kill Jews. So, Muslims can help to bring about the end times and the consummation of all things by killing Jews, according to this hadith. And it does seem as if this gentleman in Britain was operating according to those assumptions.
And that's just a really really horrible state of affairs, because you would hope that as time goes on, that that you know the Muslims surrounding Israel would realize, okay, we can't win by defeating these guys and so on. So let's just, hey, let's all agree to disagree here and try to move on with our lives, and let's all just try to get along as best we can. But when you have an ideology saying, hey, in order to bring about, don't you want to bring about the end of the world? Well, if you really want to bring about the end time so you can go to paradise and get all your virgins and so on, you have to keep slaughtering this one group. And so, yep, pretty bad. And if it were any other group in the world, if it were any other group in the world that said, hey, in order to bring about the end times, we have to go on a killing spree against this other group, you'd be allowed to talk about it. But since it is Islam, then you can only talk about it if you're a hate monger and a racist.
There you go. And also, since there's so much anti-Semitism that is not Islamic, people are less sympathetic because the targets are Jews. That's a shame, but that's the way it is. All right, in Austria, there was a man in Vienna distributing Bibles and other Christian literature, and he had a shirt on that said, "Christ is God," in Arabic, which, of course, you might understand might be a red flag to a certain demographic. And
Mormons.
So one of the members of this particular demographic came up and began to chased him down, and began kicking him in the middle of Vienna. He was in such a rage over his "Christ is God" t-shirt. In India, there has been quite a lot of unrest, and a very interesting story of a man, a Hindu, who had Muslim neighbors, good friends, and there had been escalating violence in the area. And so this Hindu gentleman went to his Muslim neighbors, and he said, as I heard of violence escalating during the Ram Navami procession, a Hindu procession, in another area of Khargone, I told my neighbors to lock themselves safe in their houses. I also closed the doors to protect my family. But later, these same Muslim neighbors joined the rioters and led a mob attack on my family. That's what the man said, and there is abundant precedent for this. Just as there is abundant precedent for the rocks in the Al-Aqsa Mosque, there is abundant precedent, and I have stories going back years from Jihad Watch of people's friends and neighbors who are Muslims murdering them. This is not to say that every Muslim who is friendly with a non-Muslim and has a non-Muslim neighbor is suddenly going to turn on them and kill them. But there is abundant precedent, including Tamerlan Tsarnaev, the Boston Marathon bomber, who had actually Jewish friends. And on 9/11, 2011, he slit the throat of one of his Jewish friends. The murder was never solved until after the Boston Marathon bombing. And there are many other examples I've got listed at Jihad Watch. Now, this might happen actually because, very briefly, do not take Jews and Christians as your friends, chapter 5, verse 51 of the Quran. What do you do if you've taken a Jew or Christian as your friend and then you repent and return to Allah? Well, you have to deal with the friendship and make it up to Allah that you have taken this infidel as your friend in defiance of his orders.
Yeah,
So
Robert,
this,
and you're familiar with this goes all the way back to the time of Muhammad. So you go all the way back and remember those two brothers, Mu'isa and Hu'isa, and
yeah,
one of the brothers converted to Islam and then runs out and kills a Jew, and the other brother says, "What are you doing? He's a friend of the family. I mean, he's a friend of our family. Why'd you go out and kill him?" And then so the brother says, "Well, if the one who ordered me to kill the Jew ordered me to kill you too, I'd kill you too." And then the brother goes, "Wow, something that makes you do this must be true," and he converted too. So it's
I don't
interesting.
see how that follows.
Yeah,
If you ask me, that's flawed logic there, Mr. Philosophy. I don't know.
yeah. It is. You do see that sort of thing in multiple times in the Muslim sources. That sort of whatever makes you most aggressive and violent, it must be because it's true. Because you're not going to get that excited and enraged over something that's a lie. They even decided. They even decided wars based on this because when Abu Bakr decided to launch the apostate wars after Muhammad died, and some of the people were just saying, "Hey, we're still Muslims. We're still Muslims. We still pray. We're just not paying zakat to you. We're going to handle zakat as charity on our own." Abu Bakr said, "I'm coming to kill you too. I'm coming to kill you all as apostates if you are not doing exactly what we tell you to do." And Umar, who was next in line to be caliph, Umar objects and says, wait a minute, we're only allowed, someone converts to Islam, we're only allowed to kill them if they apostatize, or if they commit adultery, or if they kill another Muslim. Those people not paying zakat correctly are not in any of those categories. What are you doing, right? And Abu Bakr's perspective was, well, if you are not doing everything exactly correctly, then you're actually I'm putting you in the apostate category, and I'm coming to kill you. But Umar has this interesting line where he says something like, "I could tell by the heaving of his chest that he was right." So
Yeah,
it's not I could tell by your brilliant argument or your reasoning. It was just I could tell by how enraged he got over this and how much he wanted to go kill these people that he must be right. And so it's just weird to have that as a criterion. And I think that really drives a lot of what we see in places like Pakistan, where everyone has to form a mob and go on a killing spree over a mere accusation. That, like in that mindset, like the more enraged we get over the Quran or blasphemy or something like that, the more inclined we are to kill, the more it shows that we're on the right team here. It's just very, very peculiar thinking.
absolutely. Speaking of peculiar thinking, Muhammad Salah al
You have the best transitions ever.
Well, you know Muhammad Salah al Munajid, very famous preacher, very famous Islamic scholar, and he has issued a fatwa that bans serving food before the end of the day to non-Muslims. Now, this is noteworthy because what he's essentially saying is that at least publicly, the non-Muslims have to observe the Ramadan fast. And we are often told in the West that Sharia only applies to Muslims, doesn't apply to non-Muslims. Non-Muslims have nothing to do with it, so they don't have anything to worry about in regard to it. And yet we see again and again that Muslims expect that non-Muslims must conform their behavior to suit Muslim sensibilities in Muslim countries and in non-Muslim countries. And so Muhammad Saleh al Munajid has just given us a confirmation of that. Another interesting story coming out of ISIS, which still very much exists and is quite active in India and in Afghanistan and in Africa, in Nigeria, Somalia, and Mozambique. This is the Islamic State Khorasan province. And so that's in Afghanistan and in that Central Asia area. And they, interestingly enough, they have emphasized that fighting with the tongue, the jihad of the tongue, is as important as the jihad of warfare. And you know, you would think that ISIS is just going to be all about warfare, But think about the inroads that the jihadis have made in the West without warfare. Uh, Not to say there hasn't been any here, they're quite the contrary, but the jihad of the pen and the tongue have been extraordinarily effective in teaching people to be afraid to talk about jihad, afraid to talk about the Islamic texts and teachings, afraid to be called Islamophobes. That's all the jihad of the pen, and it's worked very well for them.
Yeah, and I mean, Muhammad was asked which type of jihad is best, and he specifically referred to the kind of jihad that involves violence and getting injured and so on. So he said that the best kind was the kind that's actually fighting. But nevertheless, there is this common theme running through the Muslim sources that whatever is going to work best, whatever is going to be most effective for the Muslim community is what you should do. And so that's why we see Muhammad when, hey, it's peace and tolerance when he's in the minority. And then when he has a bigger following, then it's defensive jihad. And then when he's the most powerful, then it's offensive jihad, subjugate everyone. There is this element of whatever is most practical and whatever's going to work best. So, yeah, if I were on their side, I would be saying, hey guys, we would be much more effective using these methods than actually going out and fighting and terrorizing people right now.
But there's also, of course, a trajectory. And the Meccan passages in the Quran, you have Muhammad asking for tolerance, not really preaching tolerance for others, but demanding tolerance of the Muslims from the non-Muslims. And then you have the move to Medina and the transition to defensive jihad, and finally the preaching of offensive jihad. This is, of course, not my classification. This goes back to as far back as Ibn Ishaq, Muhammad's first biographer, in the middle of the 8th century. And so it is a paradigm that repeats itself throughout history. When Muslims are a small group that is powerless, then they preach tolerance and peace. When they gain more power, however, then you get more aggression. And we have seen this again and again. We're starting to see this now in Europe. And the story out of Greece is an illustration of that, where in the middle of a church in Athens, there's video, and I have the video up at Jihad Watch. It's all over Twitter. Middle of the church, the choir is singing away. A Muslim walks into the church, walks up to the microphone, and starts to proclaim Quran verses. And he's immediately, two guys in the choir grab him and lead him out of the church. But this is a kind of aggressiveness that we're seeing increasingly. I have given you stories over the last few weeks, particularly out of France, of Muslims going into churches, starting to yell Allahu Akbar, or leaving. The guy left an IED in a church in France that I mentioned last week, I believe. And now this guy is going in and proclaiming Islam from this church in Greece. This is a kind of aggressiveness that is new from the migrants in Europe. And we didn't see it just a few years ago. And I think that as they get to be more numerous in Europe and more powerful, then we're going to see more and more of this.
Yeah, and it's those three stages of jihad where peace and tolerance when you're in a minority, claim victim status, that sort of thing. Then once you're strong enough to fight, then you can wage defensive jihad. And then once you're the most powerful force, you subjugate everyone else and impose Sharia on them. We've not only seen that going on for 14 centuries. I tell people when I describe this, I say, pick a country anywhere in the world. Don't tell, and I say, don't tell me what the country is, just tell me the percentage. Just tell me the percentage in the country. And I will tell you exactly what's being proclaimed about Islam in that country. I can tell you exactly because it always fits. And just to be clear, ladies and gentlemen, so that no one misunderstands, I'm not saying that if you know another Muslim student, or you have have a Muslim neighbor or a Muslim coworker, and if that Muslim tells you that Islam's religion of peace, that person's lying. I'm not saying that at all. That Muslim probably believes that, right? Your Muslim friend in college probably believes that Islam is peaceful and tolerant. This goes up to their leaders. Their leaders tell them, their scholars, their sheikhs, their imams tell them what they're supposed to believe in that context. and so they're just doing it. But the problem is once those numbers change, their sheikhs and imams start teaching something very different.
Hmm. And so a lot of it is on the infidels for not being aware of this and not making preparation for it in their own countries. And I've got a few dumb infidels stories
Dumb.
this week.
We could do a
Yeah,
show. We could do an entire show called "Dumb Infidels."
yeah, absolutely. There's always dumb infidel stories. I really should start a dumb infidel section at Jihad Watch. Uh, Here we have a story out of Vienna. This is an Islamic State jihadi, an ISIS terrorist who was recruiting people for ISIS and fighting for ISIS in Iraq and Syria. Then he goes back to Vienna, to Austria, and starts recruiting for ISIS there. But he gets a job as a security guard at the at the Vienna Austria Center, Vienna. All right, and his even though he had this record as a terrorist, as a known ISIS terrorist who had continued his activities when he returned to Austria, he got this job as a security guard at this place where infidels congregate. But now he is in hot water because he is accused of raping a coworker at the Austria Center, Vienna. And of course, she was a woman who was not covered and thus liable to be molested, as the Quran says in chapter 33, verse 59. So this is a classic dumb infidel story. First, they let him back into the country. Then they didn't put him in prison. Then they give him a job at this place where he's actually providing security. And they let him loose where there are women who are not covered and assume that everything is going to be okay. You could have predicted everything that happened, but of course, nobody in Austria dared do so. It would have been Islamophobic.
Yeah, there. I mean, it seems. I mean, this guy only got into that position through like multiple layers of stupid. I mean, you could understand someone being stupid in like one way, but it's like it's like for this guy to get in a position to rape that woman at that place. It's like there are all these gates of stupidity that have to be opened for him, and they're just, oh, here's another one. Oh, hey, come on in here, ISIS recruiter. Hey, come on, yeah. We'll put you in charge of everything. Blah blah blah. Well,
That's it. All right, here's another dumb infidel story out of France. And this is, I think this guy's name is in this story, if I'm not mistaken. Um, I can't find it right away. In any case, oh yeah, Majdi Mustafa Nema. And he is another ISIS guy who is actually accused of torture and crimes against humanity while he was in Syria. And not only did the French give him a visa, but it was a visa for the Erasmus Plus program, which is for foreign students to come and study in France. And I think what on earth do they think he's going to study in France? Beheading? He's accused of crimes against humanity, but that does not stop him from getting issued a student visa. And so the French, now, of course, he's accused of torture and war crimes, and he's in all kinds of trouble because people have found out. But if he had laid low, he might have just gotten away with it and been able to wage jihad in France.
yeah, they're. I mean, my goodness, what do you got to? What do you got to? What do you got to do? I mean, if crimes against humanity, I mean, the Babylon Bee is banned on Twitter. You know what I mean? It's like, in fact, one of the guys got banned. Like you had the main account get banned, and one of the other guys goes, oh, hey, maybe if I put a bunch of Uyghurs in concentration camps, then they'll let me slide. And then they banned him for that. So they're not banning the actual country that's doing that, but they ban him for being sarcastic about it. And meanwhile, you got dudes who are committing crimes against humanity, and they're good to go as far as France is concerned.
Yeah. Would it be Islamophobic to
Wow.
keep it up?
That's by the way, that's why all that jihad of the pen and jihad of the tongue and so on are so effective. Is you can just if you really are successful with this talk of Islamophobia and making people cower. I mean, keep in mind, I mean, the grooming gangs in the UK and everything else that's happened that people get away with for so long. It's all because people get in this state where they're scared of being an Islamophobe, and once the entire population becomes especially the people who are in positions of power and authority, once they become terrified of being called a name, being called an Islamophobe or something like that, looks like you can literally get away with murder, rape, gang rape, torture. You could get away with all that. No one's going to lift a finger because we don't want to be called. We don't want to be called names.
That's right. I got a story like that out of Iowa. Iowa Congresswoman Cindy Axne. She recently aroused a bit of controversy because she was criticizing Christianity and said they use it like a weapon and it's painful to watch because they have weaponized religion. And so that's all very well. She was talking about Christianity, and then she put on a hijab and visited the Islamic Cultural Center Bosniak of Des Moines in Iowa and happily posed for pictures in her hijab for an iftar meal. It
Smart.
never seemed to occur to her that if you really want people who've weaponized religion, Muslims are past masters at this. And to say that she's upset with Christians for weaponizing religion, but go to the mosque completely uncritically and without any hesitation, indicates the power of this whole Islamophobia narrative. That she knows that it would be far worse to be accused of Islamophobia than to be anti Christian. Nobody cares if she criticizes Christians or Christianity. But if it comes to criticizing the hijab when it's forced upon women, or criticizing the brutalization of women who have declined to wear the hijab, she wouldn't dare say a word. That would be Islamophobic.
Well, in her defense, it's hard to weaponize Islam when it's been weaponized from the beginning.
Yes, indeed. It's not as if it's anything new. That's for sure. Uh, oh, here's a great dumb infidel story out of Canada. I can't believe this, really. I couldn't believe it. You won't believe it. But I had the picture. I took down the picture because I take the pictures down after a couple days, but you can click on the links and you'll see the picture. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario in Canada has been advertising for Ramadan.
Nice.
And so they they had this very nice full color ad with all these various liquors you could buy for Ramadan.
Sweet.
And a lot of people pointed out in the comments, well, they probably know their customers. They probably do actually have a lot of Muslims who buy liquor, and they didn't realize that it's against the law. And that may well be, because in Islam, the observance of the prohibitions and the various commands is generally predicated on whether or not you get caught not doing it. And if you cannot get caught, then you're okay and pretty much can do whatever you want. It's a matter of external appearance more than anything else. All right, we have quite a lot of violence. When you were talking, and you're quite correct, of course, that there's far less, but when you've got 402 dead over Ramadan, that's quite a few individual acts of violence. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, there were jihad raids on 2 villages. Many people, of course, had their throats slit in accordance with Quran 47:4. When you meet the unbelievers, strike the necks. 30 people were murdered. In Nigeria, there have been several raids, as there are practically on a daily basis. Attacks on Christian villages with 80 people murdered, 115 homes torn down. In another instance, 14 Christians were murdered. In another, 100 people were murdered and the houses ransacked. These are all separate attacks. In Nigeria, they suffer the highest rate of Islamic State attacks. That's ISIS attacks. ISIS is, of course, by no means dead. And the Boko Haram jihad group in Nigeria, the most sizable faction of it, became a part of ISIS, calls itself the Islamic State West Africa province, and they are quite active. The government, which is under the authority of the president Muhammadu Buhari, doesn't do anything to stop the jihadis, and there are increasing charges that they are on their side.
Yeah, it's an ongoing massive problem, and I think the mainstream media is actually pretty racist, not in terms of their thinking, hey, this group is superior to that group or something like that, but in terms of what they report. I mean, the things
Yeah,
going on in Africa with jihadis slaughtering people left and right. And it's never a big issue. Whereas, you look at the numbers, it'll be 60, 80, 120 people or something like that slaughtered. And
mhm.
at most, you'll see like a little BBC mention of it or something like that, but it never becomes something that is a big concern in the world. Whereas if this were in Europe or something like that, they would be talking about it. But I mean, people massively underestimate the significance of what's happening in a place like Nigeria, because as Islam has expanded, there are places where there's like a dividing line. It's like Islam dominates on this side of the line, and there are non-Muslims on the other side of the line, and the Sharia files constantly want to push that line further and further and further. And they don't care if it takes 500 years. If we just keep pushing it a little more, little more, little more, little more, little more, little more, then we've got the entire country, and then we're going to the next country. Well, Nigeria is one of those places. Nigeria is one of those dividing lines where you've got these jihadi groups and so on dominating the north, and then in the south you have tons and tons of Christians and so on. You got jihadis trying to push that line, trying to eventually take over the entire country, and they're absolutely relentless in the attacks. It's constant, ongoing jihad attacks to take over a very, very, very important part of Africa, so that they can continue pushing further south, and it's just never news for some reason.
Yeah, I do think that they're racist. And I've seen this over the years, David, because I cover at Jihad Watch all these stories out of Nigeria. It's just absolutely horrific, day after day after day. And not just Nigeria, but Somalia is just as bad or almost as bad. And then there's jihad activity really all over Africa. Mozambique, there's quite a lot of ISIS activity. And I'm the only one covering it practically.
And you're
Uh,
and you're and you're and you're a bad evil guy for covering it.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And so it's astonishing to me. And I do believe, you may recall that when the Ukraine war started, there was some correspondent who actually said that it was shocking to see this kind of violence in people like us. And I thought, oh, see, it really didn't bother you when those people over there were killing each other. That's just what they do.
Well, it's
But
just it's just so dumb given the 20th century, right? It's like
yeah,
Europeans got sick of fighting for a while, right? And now we're shocked that someone's making a comeback with the fighting and so on. But don't act like this is because you know, you're shocked because white people don't do that sort of thing. What planet are you from?
yeah, and it's not racial at all. It's ideological.
Mm-hmm.
It happened in Europe in the 20th century because of a couple of murderous ideologies, and it happens in the Islamic world because of a murderous ideology.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, I guess a lot of the problem is everyone's resolutely ignoring that murderous ideology, and so they have to ascribe the violence to something else. All right, I have all this time, and we're almost out of time, and I haven't said anything about Sweden. But I know
Ah,
you mentioned you had made a video about Sweden. I got a few stories here about it. Of course, the Quran burning, I should emphasize, did not actually happen. All this is going on, all these riots for days, and police cars getting burned, and people destroying things and screaming Allahu Akbar. It's all happening because there was going to be a Quran burning. It didn't actually even happen. But it's just like people getting killed on rumors of blasphemy in Pakistan, which happens on an alarming basis. This is designed to frighten people into not even daring to plan such an event ever in the future.
yeah, and it's I think it's I mean, all the people who are total cowards, they're already scared. They're not going to do anything. So the violent riots aren't exactly going to help that situation. But basically, someone who would publicly burn a Quran is either like a diehard proponent of free speech. He's trying to let you know, hey, you need to understand, and I will do this as many times as I have to, but I'm going to make you understand that I'm allowed to do this in this country. I know I couldn't do that somewhere else, but you're in this country, and I need you to understand so that the world can move forward that you cannot stop me from doing this in this country. So there's that. But and then there's someone who, for political purposes, would say, I'm going to do this because I know they're gonna riot, and then I can point out how they can't handle free speech. They're going to prove my point for me instead of me just saying, hey, they can't deal with freedom of speech. I'll just do something, and then they'll riot, and I'll say, you see, I kind of told you. And so it's just amazing that. In my video, I explained this. I was like, imagine a world where someone shows up to burn a Quran and you just ignore him and you say, hey, this is Ramadan. We don't care. We don't care about the haters and stuff. Then like everyone would be like, wow, that guy's wrong. You guys are right. Instead, it's, we'll burn everything. We'll burn this entire country to the ground. And it's like, yes, you can make people scared, but it's not real respect. It's not real respect. You're just.
But it doesn't get what you want. You didn't get the Quran burned. I'll close actually tonight with one story that's like that.
Side note: I'm pretty sure the dude will be back. That's my prediction. Yeah. Pretty sure that'll be back. Yeah. Good.
Out of Malaysia, this writer Uthaya Sankar, he allegedly wrote a Facebook post insulting Muhammad, and Malaysia being a Muslim country. He spent the night in jail, and he said, I have learned my lesson. I will keep away from Islam and not write anything about Islam in the future. That would be the best. Mm-hmm. And so this is why they do this. Violent intimidation works.
It does. Well, it works. It works until you get down to the people like us, and then. But
of course, I'm shot at and poisoned, and I'm still, I'm still doing it. So
that's what I mean. So it gets down to you can only push around so many people, and then you get down to the people who the tactics don't work on them anymore, and then you can't figure out what to do because the only tactics don't work on them anymore. So you either have to kill people like us, or you need some sort of new methods. But it's just weird. Over the years, I've seen that like death threats. They started sending me death threats years ago, and like after like thousands of death threats, that they'll still send me death threats. It's like you haven't figured out that is not how to get your way here. But it's like, no, we must do it. That's what we've been trained to do. That's what worked. That's what works. That's what works. Weird stuff.
Yes, sir. Well, there's plenty more as always, but I see that our time is up.
Yep, looks like we will have to be back for more Jihad next week, as Ramadan will be. At least we've made it halfway through Ramadan, and it's just weird when I look at all of those dozens of terrorist attacks and hundreds of bodies, and I'm thinking, wow, so much better than previous years. It's like they've set the bar so low. Right, that
only 42 people killed.
Yeah, only that many people slaughtered in the name of Allah. It's the world's getting so much better. Anyway, thanks for keeping everyone updated, Robert. And as usual, ladies and gentlemen, what's that?
Thank you, David.
Mm-hmm. As usual, everyone, get a copy of The Critical Quran. Robert and I are very soon going to do a live stream where we actually go through some of the Critical Quran. Get your copy. Well, you still have to pre-order, but get your copy. The link is in the description box, as well as a link to the history of Jihad. You definitely need those if you want to understand what's going on in the world today and what's going to be going on in the near future. You definitely need to have both those books. All right. Well, until next week in Jihad, this has been This Week in Jihad.